One of the technique categories that we use in facilitation is conducting. And conducting can be very seductive. It's very tempting to want to use a strategy or technique set that is capable of producing very clear-cut results, very fast results. Conducting is excellent for eliciting a unified group response. If I jump up and down in the middle of a group, I can control the entire group because I'm basically establishing a leader-follower relationship with every individual in that group. And this can be really alluring to facilitators where they want to get something done, right? They want to lower the volume, or they want to speed up, or they want to raise the volume, or they want everybody to stop. Conducting comes in a couple forms. We use visual cues that consist of arm movements, facial expression, whole body movements like jumping and maybe crouching down. We use verbal cues, which can include saying 1, 2, everybody play, for example. We can give different kinds of verbal cues. A lot of the conducting is done through a visual cue. Now, it's really important to understand that when you conduct, you are creating certain kinds of relationships, you're creating certain kinds of dynamics within the group and between the participants and yourself. You are also discontinuing certain kinds of relationships and dynamics between the participants and within the music. So here are a few of the things that you can consider when thinking about using conducting, or what we like to call conduction, which would be the in-the-moment, active, sort of improvised version of conducting. So firstly, conducting creates a leader-follower relationship. When I conduct you, I'm telling you what to do. I'm the leader and you're the follower. Now, you can do that, but make sure that that's what would be beneficial for your participants. Is it going to be beneficial for them to be the follower and while you're the leader? Secondly, conducting requires your participants to decode the visual and verbal information that you're trying to give them. Making gestures is a form of communication, but it's a non-musical form because it has to be translated from a visual or an auditory cue that's language-based into what do I do musically? What does he or she want me to do? I see them doing something, but now I have to translate that in my mind. So it's what we call cross-modal. It's going from visual to a musical response. You can avoid that kind of need for translating or decoding the information if you stay within the music. If you can use a musical means, such as shaping or changing the way that you play as a facilitator to communicate that change or that dynamic. Say you want to speed up. Well, rather than getting up and conducting a speeding up, you could use your instrument to gradually speed up, or gradually slow down, or gradually change the volume, one way or the other. You can do all kinds of things through the musical approach to facilitation. And you wouldn't be creating a leader-follower dynamic necessarily, and you're not requiring anybody to translate it because you're staying in the music. Thirdly, conducting is controlling. I was giving a training once, and a gentleman stood up and walked over to a lady who was in the circle, and he was standing right in front of her, and he was doing a lot of gestures, and after a while she said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm facilitating you. And in his mind, facilitating was equal to, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to conduct you. And she was surprised, and he was surprised, and we all kind of laughed about it. But it's something to be mindful of, because even though you would never do that, you wouldn't walk up to an individual and stand right in front of somebody and tell them what to do. When you stand in the middle of a circle, that's in fact what you're doing to every individual in that circle. you're at the center of the wheel, and you're creating really an individual one-to-one dynamic with each one of those people. And so you just want to be mindful of that. Is that what you want to do? Do you want to be controlling in that way? Do you want to limit their participation to what you are giving them to do? Fourth, the act of conducting, it can interrupt somebody's intramusical experience. An intramusical experience is an internal experience that somebody's having when they're creating music. It's the relationship between somebody's own playing and maybe the way they're feeling and maybe the way they're thinking. So it's kind of that internal musical experience. We call that intramusical. When you conduct, of course, you're requiring somebody to then focus on you, focus on something else, so they can then lose that connection. It can also interrupt the intermusical relationships that are in the circle. When people are playing together, they're connecting with each other, they're listening to each other, they're responding to each other. When I'm playing with a group of people, I'm hearing different elements, different dynamics coming from different places in the group. And one of the fun things I like about a drum circle is that I can choose who I want to connect with at different times. And I actually train facilitators to be able to do that. We tune into the different elements and we can create really dynamic relationships between our fellow musicians. When I take on a leadership role or there's somebody there conducting, those relationships have to cease for that time. We have to stop that and we have to focus on the one person. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Do you want to create that kind of relationship? Do you want to sever those intermusical relationships that are forming and being nurtured within the community? Conducting is also a top-down model. It's a single leader with a lot of followers. And if you think about a pyramid, that's what it is basically. It's one leader with a lot of people below that person. Even if it's somebody in the middle of a circle with spokes going outward, it's still the same relationship. So if you took that person in the middle conducting and you looked at it on its side, it would be a cone with somebody at the top. I don't know if that's necessarily the relationships that we want to create in the circle. Maybe it is, maybe it is. In a setting where things are very chaotic or there's a lot of need for structure, then probably a little bit of conducting would be the thing to do. But you just want to be mindful that you're not automatically going into that mode unless it's needed. Another thing that conducting tends to do is you reduce the amount of self-determination that the individuals have in your group. And I talked a little bit about this when I talked about severing those ties to the intermusical experiences. There's also the aspect of, hey, I'm here in the drum circle and I get to do what I want. Remember, I talked a little bit before about the fact that people come for different reasons. And you don't know what those reasons are. But those are individual reasons to be in the drum circle. And people, they participate in ways that they want to participate. So if somebody is just sitting and listening, you don't want to necessarily tell them, hey, you need to play. Or if somebody's playing with their eyes closed, you don't necessarily want to interrupt that internal experience and say, hey, you need to open your eyes and look at me. So you want to be mindful of that. You want to respect people's unique way of participating and facilitate music that's conducive to that. Conducting can be useful for very large groups. For example, if I'm working with a big conference group or let's say a lot of children and it's their first time, and I know that they're going to need a lot of structure and they're going to need some guidance. They're going to want some guidance initially. And so I certainly would consider conducting, standing up, maybe making the pulse clear. Not all conducting has to be top down. It can be middle in, where you are, as a conductor, reflecting the pulse, let's say. You just pick up on the pulse that you're hearing, and you reflect that visually back to the group. Maybe you just hey, this is a cool rhythm. Here it is. I'm just going to show you what you're doing already. There's certain ways you can use conducting effectively. Certainly for large groups, it can be really useful. I always recommend using conducting as a last resort, not as the first line of intervention. But if you can do your shaping and facilitating through the way you play, you can stay in the music, you can facilitate interconnectedness, you can facilitate autonomy among your participants, allowing them to connect with the experience in any way that's right for them. And by doing that, we gain more. We all gain more. We deepen our experience, and we never, ever get in people's way.